It's not often that one watch gets a dedicated video, but the Rolex Landdweller is one that I found so interesting that I had to talk about it. I've been back from Watches and Wonders for a while now, and I saw it down there, and I've since had hands-on. It's not my favorite Rolex ever, very far from it, but it is in some ways a bit of a groundbreaking model for Rolex, and it says a lot about where Rolex is right now. This is a watch that could be construed as a premium Tissot PRX, but there's more to it than that. To me, it's an illustration of what Rolex is very good at, what they're not particularly good at, and it's also an illustration of how difficult it is to talk about Rolex in general. Let's dive in. Let's get the review piece out of the way. To me, that's the least interesting part. First of all, it's built, put together, and finished to the usual high Rolex standards. It's solid, it feels like high quality, the fluted bezel screams premium as it always does. It has fewer bevels than the Datejust bevels, which works well with the 70s oyster quartz design. The intricacy of the honeycomb dial is downright impressive from a technical standpoint. The bracelet isn't quite royal oak levels, but it is exceptionally well put together. I'm assuming that the new movement will prove to be really reliable. Rolex, for the most part, isn't known for making garbage, untested movements. The watch is thin, and even the design of the case and bracelet allow for this watch to wear more true to size than most integrated bracelet watches usually do. This be a really well-made watch. Personally, I'm not that enamored with it. The honeycomb dial, I personally think is just not my taste, especially because it's really pronounced. Usually when you see something in photos, some features tend to be exaggerated compared to how they stand out in real life. But the honeycomb in real life is really prominent. And I know I didn't warm to the Ingenieur dial initially either, but I'm mindful that my opinion can move, but right now that honeycomb feels a bit much, and it's not even honeycomb because it's compressed. So it's just not right to me. The 6 and 9 on the dials feels out of place to me. The sloped chapter ring is too much to my tastes. The case design itself is super reminiscent of a Vacheron 222 or a Tissot PRX, or of course the multitude of Rolex models that inspired this watch. This is very much a recreation of history of former Rolex models and not a copy of something else. But there's no doubt that I'm affected by having seen so many integrated bracelets watches in the last 5 years that this one just doesn't ring my bell. It has no strong negatives like the Cubitus had. It's nowhere near as polarizing. It's just nice. That's my feeling right now. If I had to choose, I'd get an Ingenieur, probably more than I'd get this watch. Nice, and that's it. Now, who's it for? It's for people that want to wait in line for a Rolex, and preferably the newest Rolex. It's for people that like the integrated 70s style bracelet design and want a higher end Rolex, but don't want the duller and more mainstream and, dare I say it, dated Datejust two-tone or Day-Date. It's the Rolex integrated bracelet option, and it's going to be hard to get. It's going to be a waitlist model like all new Rolex models always are. Is it going to kill the Nautilus or the Royal Oaks? No. Is it going to siphon some people off of a Zenith Defy Skyline or an IWC Ingenieur? Absolutely. But I also think it's going to siphon some people off of the Datejust and the Day-Date. But I'll get back to that. So is it a grail, a shortlist, a think about it, or a better options out there? Well, to me, it's a think about it. Review over. Now, on to the real conversation. Ask people in the know about Rolex and they say that Rolex moves at a glacial pace. Rolex doesn't seem to jump on trend in the way that other brands sometimes do. The Landdweller is the embodiment of this. Recently, I've been thinking that the integrated bracelet trend was losing steam. Every brand and their sister has by now launched an integrated bracelet. I would never have put my money on Rolex launching an integrated bracelet. Even Adrian Barker thought that this was an April Fool's joke. But they did. And this is the weirdest thing with Rolex. This is probably the most groundbreaking release Rolex has had in decades in terms of introducing something new. And yes, the 1908 was also new, but it's nowhere near the scale of innovation that this watch represents. The Skydweller isn't representative of a lot of innovation either. Sure, it had a novel complication, but it basically was just a bigger Datejust or a more complicated Day-Date, depending on how you look at it. This is a new case design, a new category, a new movement, a new bracelet, a new dial. All of it is new for Rolex. But it's also still just an integrated bracelet watch with inspiration from the 70s. It's groundbreaking, and it's late to the party, and it's just an incredibly safe, non-daring release. The thing I've always stated was that Rolex has a very clear upgrade path for all their models. It's something they do really, really well. So as an example, the Oyster Perpetual's upgrade is the non-fluted Datejust. And from there, you can go to the fluted Datejust, then you have some mini upgrades in terms of dials and jewels and Jubilee bracelet. But the full upgrade from the Datejust is the two-tone Datejust. And from the two-tone, you go to the day-date. So Oyster Perpetual, Datejust, day-date. But now we have the Landdweller. The Landdweller isn't an entry model that competes with the Oyster Perpetual. The OP is about $7,000 or $7,500 depending on the model and wherever you live. The Landdweller is around $16,000, $17,000 in the large model. That's about the same price as the two-tone Datejust and the steel Skydweller. The gold Landdweller is basically priced like a day-date in gold. Initially, this was a little bit baffling to me because, at least to me, the strength of Rolex's lineup has always been that there's very little cannibalization between models. If you want a chronograph, you can only get the Daytona. If you want a GMT with a turnable bezel, it's the only GMT you can get. But a new picture is being painted. Now it's not a path that goes OP, Datejust, two-tone Datejust, and day-date. At the level above the steel Datejust is three options: the Skydweller, the Landdweller, and the core two-tone Datejust. This is both in keeping with and a departure from what I see as normal Rolex practice. First of all, the norm is that options are not at the entry level. It's from two-tone and upwards that customers get the most variety. The Landdweller here delivers that expanded menu of options for the non-entry customer. But I am still surprised that it's necessary to add this level of cost and complexity to their lineup. I mean, the things that bounce around my head is, why did they need to add options by adding this level of cost complexity? Usually, Rolex just makes some new dials, and that's more than enough for what they need to keep people happy. So why a whole new product? And I keep coming back to two things. First of all, this isn't about growing the Rolex customer base. This isn't about hoping for a smash hit like a PRX or a Moonswatch to get throngs of new customers to come to Rolex. I think it's to stem the outflow of customers that are not buying a two-tone Datejust and buying something from Omega instead. I also think it's together with the Skydweller there to stem the outflow of customers that don't care about the day-date anymore and are more consistently choosing a Chapek Antarctique or a Royal Oak or any manner of other integrated bracelet. The day-date doesn't have the status that it once had in the echelons of the Royal Oaks and Nautiluses and those kind of watches. There was a time when it was a true status piece. Now it's almost a starter piece for the rich cool kids. And even then, it might not even be a starter unless it's blinged out. I think there's a legitimate argument to be made that this is to keep high-end customers at Rolex who just don't care about the day-date or Datejusts anymore. I honestly don't think it's about growing a new customer base. It's likely more about stopping the bleed from two-tone Datejusts and gold day-dates. I know it's a hot take. I've got no proof, but I think there's a reasonable argument to be made for this line of thinking. It's also not about entry. The time of new entry-level watches for Rolex is over. I read someone somewhere write that they were looking forward to a full steel Landdweller priced like a Datejust with no fluting. And that's never, ever happening as far as I'm concerned. This is positioned as an upgrade. And more importantly, apart from a dial change here and there, I doubt we're ever going to see a new entry model again from Rolex. I mean, we might see a Milgauss, but then they'd probably discontinue the Air King. We won't see a fourth or fifth or sixth dial variation on a steel Submariner. We're not going to see a steel 1908. I think we all talk so much about how people want the steel Daytona and the Pepsi GMT in steel and the Submariner, but it's more and more apparent to me that steel is not where Rolex wants to be. I don't necessarily see them going full Patek and more or less ditching all steel, but steel these days functions as filler and teaser for Rolex. The effort, the innovation, and the abundance is from that upgrade level all the way up to gold, platinum, and gems. That's where Rolex puts their energy. To me, the most interesting innovation out of all of this is the movement. Rolex has launched a movement that can fit in a sub 10mm case. I really hope Omega are paying attention. It's 5 hertz, so Grand Seiko and Zenith are not that special anymore. They're also promising chronometer accuracy. They're promising an escapement which has higher longevity, potentially at least. This is huge. If this movement was in a GMT or a Datejust or a Datedate, I would buy it in a heartbeat. For me, a reliable wear and tear resistant 5 hertz sweep is the ball game. Specs don't always matter, but here it does. So if they don't do an Omega Spirate BS thing where they just put it in one model but extend this to more products, I'm Fry and Rolex can take my money. I suppose it's unfair to knock Rolex on this because everybody does this, but I do think this whole let's see what we've got in our back catalog from whatever decade that is on trend now and let's launch that is just sad. I mean, I get it. The 70s and retro is becoming in, so why not? But where's the daring attempt to do something new? Where's the attempt to throw something out there that is untested? In 50 years' time, these watchmakers will be looking back at today and see there's nothing new, and there will only be the possibility to re-release something that was already re-released today. I think it's important to point out that a lot of those 70s watches some of them were one-hit wonders, some of them were commercial failures. Very few of them ended up like the Nautilus and Royal Oak that have been in the collection since the inception. I honestly think there's a lack of new ideas, which maybe isn't a problem right now, but down the road they're going to run out of back catalogue if their new ideas stopped in 1984. And yes, there's a whole conversation about design and iteration and movement, but I do think there is merit to coming up with something brand new and trying and failing and then saying, okay, maybe it's going to be interesting in 10 or 15 years' time. I've got a newfound respect for the AP code 1159. That was a completely original design that they launched. And the first iteration wasn't great, but they've refined it and refined it and refined it. And now it's a popular, well-established, well-selling lineup for AP. AP didn't go down the route of let's look at some reissue and let's revitalize it for today. They said we're going to take the risky route and try something completely new. And yes, there's more risk, but there's also potentially more reward, and it gives you options down the line, and it challenges your creative energy. And I do wish brands like Rolex would do that every now and again. They don't have to do it every year. They don't have to bring up a new model every single year. But every now and again, it would be cool for them to try something completely new. Then there's the name. Why not the Metropolitan or the Cosmopolitan? But no, they had to mash in something with Dweller. I mean, it's fine for the sea, it's passable for the sky, but Landdweller is just the dumbest name. It's like one level above Cave Dweller, and it's the thing I dislike the most about this watch, by far. Whether it's watches or something else, some brands are more about design and other brands are more about engineering. And how do you know a company is an engineering company and not a watchmaking company? You know that the strength of the watch is first and foremost in its technical features. The new movement in the Landdweller is groundbreaking technically. I spoke to a guy at a Swiss dial manufacturer and he said, that dial is hard to do well. Little details like the severed stick plots and the cut loom is also really hard to do well accurately. Thinning down the case is also hard. Now, there's likely some person in the comments saying, give it 6 months and the Chinese factory brands will make something perfectly comparable to this watch. And no, they won't. They'll make something nicely polished, but engineering-wise, there are so many things that put this mass-produced watch on another level. It is, in my opinion, a technical marvel, but that is what is its strongest feature. The aesthetic itself might as well be a premium PRX. Tissot themselves insinuated that. I know it's rough and it's reductive, but the point I'm making is, apart from the 1908, Rolex hasn't really innovated in terms of aesthetic that much for ages. It's part of their strength, but it's also a weakness, and it shows. It's not a bad design, but it's not epic. The thing Rolex are best at is the engineering piece. They are not class leading in design. Aesthetically, for me, a Christopher Ward 12 has more going for it, even if it has connections to a Chapek and Tartique. Creativity-wise, Rolex isn't showing they are the leader. They are the leader in engineering. So here we are. The most surprising release from Rolex in what feels like forever. It's a technical marvel by Rolex standards for dials, for plots, for cases, for movements, but it's also retreaded design just like everybody else is doing. It's a model that initially seems oddly misplaced in Rolex's otherwise very carefully managed lineup. It's a model that at one time will likely be massively in demand, but I think is also there not to get a ton of new customers, but rather to stave off an exodus of sorts of people that just don't care about the day date and two-tone Datejusts anymore. To me, it indicates that Rolex are actually vulnerable to customer drain as well. Who knows? It's going to be years before most people get any one of these anyway. Personally, I'll be sticking with other brands. This one just doesn't speak to me. Those were my thoughts. What are your thoughts on the Landdweller? Let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe. Cheers.